you are that those of you who are a part of the Sunday morning Bible study will be um, especially good with the book of Job because you are doing that on Sunday morning as well. I was not aware of that. I probably should have asked Alan before I chose to go through Job. So yeah, so think of it as just sort of an intensive course in Job.
You'll teach it differently than he will.
And yeah,
Very different
and
ways.
not as well, I'm sure, but we will give it a shot, and I think it'll perhaps they will the things we talk about will complement one another. I'm pretty sure they will.
The parts that are probably only worth the surveys. Long speeches by the friend.
Long speeches by the friends. Yes. If you know anything about Job, you know that. Um, there are several series of three series, I believe, of speeches by at least some of the friends. The last series doesn't really get all the way through to the last friend, and that probably is significant. We'll talk about that as we go through this book. We are not going to do it verse by verse.
So thank you.
But we are going to spend some time with the friend speeches because there's some important things we need to see in those speeches. Those are there for a purpose, and we want to kind of try to understand what that purpose is, even though for most of us, what comes first and what comes at the end of Job is what we're most interested in. But there's value in that middle part too. One of the interesting things about Job, reading Job, we kind of read it differently than we do most books of the Bible, simply because we know if spoiler alert, if you go to the end of Job, you know that what the friends say God disapproves of at the end of the book. And so we sort of are already reading parts of Job to sort of find what's wrong with it instead of to be encouraged by it or strengthened by it. So that's a little odd. That's a little unusual in the reading of the Bible. I'm not sure there's much of the Bible or any of the Bible in which so much of it we kind of know going in is a little suspect. So that kind of causes a different way of looking at the book, I think, and reading the book.
Although if it's as early as some think it is, then the people that would have heard it at the time it was being written down or whatever would have probably experienced the same type of thing. I don't know.
In what way? Like, what do you mean?
It seems like the events of the book predate whoever would have been writing it down later, making it part of the canon. So maybe it already had been passed down as an oral tradition. So then the moral would have been known because of that.
Right. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, there's all kinds of theories about how old Job is. The best scholars on Job that I have been able to locate have narrowed it down to sometime between the 11th century BC and the 2nd century BC. So there you go. It's been narrowed down quite considerably as to when the book, as we know it, was written.
When do they think it took place?
Well, and that's the other thing. It's hard. It is seems to be set in the patriarchal times. You get that especially from the fact that Job, you'll see, makes sacrifices on behalf of his children, and makes sacrifices, I think, on behalf of the friends at the end of the the book, which is a sort of patriarchal way of pre law of Moses, pre Sinai, pre covenant, pre temple and tabernacle and all of that, and so when sacrifices were necessary, they were made by head of the household or patriarch of the family. Um, so it seems like it's at least set in that time period. There is some ancient, archaic kind of Hebrew in it. Some people say that means it's old. Some people say, well, that means the writer was kind of, I could throw a few these and thous into something I wrote today and try to make you think that I was writing in, Jacobean England. I could try to do this. So some people think. So we don't know. We don't know when it was written. We don't know when it was fully composed. There is a little bit of a scholarly bent right now to see Israel in Job. That it's about Israel coming back from exile, going into exile and coming back from exile. I'm not convinced. Now I'm no scholar, but I'm not convinced of that. But there are some people who kind of feel like that's what you're seeing. If that's the case, then obviously it's written exilic or post-exilic times.
Those people seem to try to do that with almost everything in the Old Testament.
There is a tendency to do that right now, to sort of see an allegory for Israel's captivity and like everything. And I'm a little reluctant to jump on that bandwagon entirely. Yeah, it's just a little too.
Jewish God?
Yeah, Jewish and Christian. Yeah.
So what they did centuries ago, where everything was an allegory for the church.
Yeah. So I mean, there may be some of that, but there is some language that suggests that the covenant exists. We'll talk about that. There is some language about Job that seems to reflect language in Deuteronomy that describes the punishment Israel will receive for breaking the covenant. One line in particular, and we'll look at that as we talk more about it. If that's the case, then it sort of makes you think, all right, maybe it was composed at least after the covenant, after the covenant stipulations were made. In the end, it's not going to matter because the message kind of becomes clear in any case. What is Job about? From what you know of Job, what's it about?
Why do bad things happen to good people?
Okay, that's kind of the thumbnail that a lot of people kind of come away with, right? That it's about this idea of, the reality of the world is bad things happen to seemingly good people. And why is that?
Of course, if that's the point of the book, it's a disappointment because we don't get the answer.
We don't get an answer to that question. So it may not be exactly about that, but that certainly is sort of how it begins, right? We have this conundrum that we're looking at. And the conundrum is we got this really good guy, Job. Let's read a little bit in Job chapter 1. I think I'm going to use the New Living Translation through most of this. There once was a man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. There once was a man named Job who lived in this place Uz, which might be Edom or near Edom, south of Israel. One of the friends is called a Temanite, which would have been Edomite. Job is probably not an Israelite, which is interesting.
Not Jewish.
Yeah, not Jewish.
Important.
But it's almost like a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That's almost the way it starts. Once upon a time is almost the way it starts. It's very vague as to where this is, who this guy is. It's just sort of, there was a guy once who lived in this place and he was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God and stayed away from evil. Now, one of the things we're going to run into with Job is we're Christians and we bring Christian theology into this book. And Christian theology says what about Job? Was he perfect?
No, he couldn't have.
He couldn't have been perfect, right? He's a human being. And so we immediately start saying, well, now wait a minute. Was he blameless? The Bible simply says he's blameless. He's a man of integrity. It's not saying he's perfect. But it is saying this is a guy who everybody knows is upright and righteous and just and good. And nobody would dispute that. He has this reputation, right?
He's a man of character.
He's a man of character. It talks about in verse 3, it talks about his wealth. 7,000 sheep, 3,000. This is a time when we measured, you measured your wealth in livestock, right? So he's got all this livestock. Many servants. He was the richest person in that entire area, it says. Wealthy guy. So he's a good person, right?
Yes.
His character is good. Life is great for him. He's got the family. He's got 7 sons and 3 daughters. It can't get much more perfect than 7 sons and 3 daughters in Job's time. I mean, he's got everything. Everything you could want, he's got. And look at verse 4. This gives you an idea of his righteousness. Job's sons would take turns preparing feasts in their homes, and they would also invite the 3 sisters to celebrate with them. When these celebrations ended, sometimes after several days, Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, "Perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular practice. He is very cautious, right, about evil, about wickedness. He doesn't want, even for his children to have cursed God in their hearts, maybe. He just doesn't want to take the chance. And so he offers these sacrifices to try to atone for whatever sins they may have committed in their hearts. This is how scrupulous he is. This is how pious he is. This is a guy who, he gets up early in the morning and offers sacrifices for all 10 of his children, right? This is who this guy
Don't
is.
you think that's high for a Gentile?
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
You wonder where to get all this righteousness
it's
from.
striking, isn't it? It's striking that we have a guy, a non-Jew, non-Israelite, this time there are no Israelites, and a non-descendant of
Adam and Eve.
Well, it's Adam, but a non, he's not a guy who's associated with Abraham's family as far as we can see. He's a guy that, but in some way or the other, he seems to have received this revelation of God because he uses the Lord, he uses the covenant Yahweh, the covenant name of God at various times in this book.
Kind of like a priest.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Priest kind of guy.
So this is a guy, and it's important to emphasize, he is a pious, religious, righteous, just, blameless person full of integrity.
If this is during the patriarchal period, isn't it somewhat extraordinary to be offering sacrifices as a response to sin? Who does that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, sacrifices, obviously, people other than the Israelites and the offered sacrifices. But it is interesting. And again, it's highlighting how righteous this guy is, right? He's somebody that even as a non-Jew, a Jewish person reading this would say, this is a righteous person. You can't deny he's a righteous person. He may not know everything about God, but he is, for what he knows, he is a righteous, just, blameless person. Blameless even sort of suggests his reputation. People know him as somebody you can trust. This is a guy you can do business with. This is a guy who's not going to stab you in the back. This is a guy who is on the up and up, and you can trust him. So he's just, this is who this guy is.
I think according to the author of the book, Job possesses before Israel.
I'm sorry, one more time.
I think Job possesses before Israel. Israel came.
Yes.
Before Israel, Job was.
Yes. Job seems to predate Israel. He seems to be easily dated in the patriarchal era before Moses, potentially before Abraham, I suppose. I don't even know that.
Yeah.
As it predates the flood.
I don't know why you would get that out of this book, but I mean, potentially I don't know. I don't know. We just don't know. We're just not given much about, that what lets us date it any more than to say, it seems like it's pre-patriarchal. I suppose you could also say, well, it may be after, um, after Moses, if he's not Israelite. I mean, perhaps he knows God, kind of the way Moses's father-in-law knew God. That he kind of knows, has this connection with God in some way, um, but is not Israelite, and so he wouldn't be part of the covenant necessarily, but could still perhaps want to offer sacrifices.
His lifespan would suggest that he's in that post-flood period as lifespans were coming down.
Yeah.
To the 120.
Right,
That
right,
was specified,
right.
because he was 140.
right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Uh,
So, good guy, righteous guy, religious guy, pious guy, right? Verse 6 then. One day the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord. So, okay, we got to pause right there, right? What's the heavenly court? That's not the way we usually think of God, right? What's the heavenly court?
Well, this says the angels.
Angels, it's been interpreted as angels sometimes. Literally, it's the sons of God. The sons of God, literally, come and are gathered together. And it's a way of talking about heavenly beings. In other cultures, it's a way of talking about heavenly beings that kind of a symbol, kind of like in this time, you'd expect a king to have a court, a king to have courtiers. Anyway, a court, and they might gather together to carry out the king's will. And so that's sort of the impression you get from that phrase. It's probably telling that by the Christian era, we don't talk much about that nobody talks much about heavenly courts anymore. By the New Testament times, nobody's talking much about heavenly courts anymore. There may be a couple of verses that suggest them, but you have this picture of an assembly of divine people, with God sort of assembling them, calling them together. Divine people, I said, divine beings, I meant, with God calling them together. And one of them comes along. And this one that comes along is called, it's literally, if you want to know some Hebrew, Hasatan. You hear it? But Ha is an article, be. So all through Job, this person, this being, I said it again, this being is known as the Satan or the accuser. It's accuser, adversary, enemy. In other places, in Zechariah, for instance, the Satan, the accuser, is pictured as sort of a prosecuting attorney, who is, and it's interesting as you sort of read this. What he seems to be interested in, at face value at least, is what's just, what's righteous. Is Job such a righteous guy? Is what he's going to ask. What you don't want to do. This is another place where we're tempted to sort of take what the New Testament tells us about Satan and sort of import it backwards. But we don't know for sure that this is the same being at all.
It's kind of an extraordinary
Yeah.
image, when you think about it, because here is Satan, which is the personification of sin and evil. And isn't there somewhere where it says God cannot stand to even look at evil?
Yeah, that's sort of the issue. We don't, it's hard to sort of fit what we think about Satan and overlay it onto this character, this being. It could be the same being, perhaps pre-fall. Some have said, is this is Satan pre-fall, before he fell, before he before he lost his place. Um, and maybe, but it is not a real one-to-one ratio. So, I think it's at least fair to suggest maybe it's not even the same being.
That descriptor is pretty telling that he's prowling through the earth, walking up and down.
Well, certainly Peter on the other end seems to take that perhaps to take that as a way of referring to Satan as we know it.
Doesn't Jesus describe him that way somewhere?
But we don't have he's not looking for someone to devour in this, right? He is patrolling the earth, checking out what's going on. Now, is he a reliable narrator? Is he an unreliable narrator? Maybe, maybe he's not telling exactly the truth. But that article is important. That matters. In Hebrew, you don't call someone by their name using an article. So it is striking that it's Hasatan. It's the Satan, the accuser, the enemy. So anyway, I leave that open because in some ways that makes it a lot easier to read Job if you're not sort of seeing God making a bet with the devil over Job. If you're not having to deal with that, in some ways it makes it a little easier to read Job. But at least just consider that possibility as we read here. So where have you come from? God says to, and I'm going to say the accuser. That's what I'm going to call him throughout the book. Where have you come from? The Lord asked the accuser.
Around the world.
Yep. And the accuser answered, the Lord, I've been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. And then the Lord said, have you noticed my servant Job? And again, he's the finest man in all the earth, blameless, complete integrity. He fears God, stays away from evil. And the accuser says, yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You've always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You've made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he'll surely curse you to your face. All right, you may test it, the Lord said to the accuser. Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically. So it's important to note who's responsible for what happens next.
You could say the accuser,
Satan.
but on the other hand, God brings up the subject from the beginning.
Okay. You got to at least say God's involved in this thing, right?
Yeah.
You got to at least say that God allows the accuser to have his way. God gives permission, and it is God who said at the beginning, "Hey, you got to take a look at this guy Job." It is kind of striking that God is involved in this, and it gives people some struggles, and it's one of the struggles of reading Job. But in my opinion, it's necessary to have God involved right from the start because of what the rest of the book is about.
Right, if he's not in control, it would be much worse.
I mean, really, think about that. Would you rather have a loving God who you trust in charge of the bad things that happen to you, or would you rather it just be random? Or worse, in the hands of a perhaps sinister figure, right? Who wants your destruction. It's hard, but I'm going to go with, I think I want God in charge of that. I think I want to recognize that God's in charge of that in some way.
Yeah.
Yet he gives Satan a certain amount of power. Now that's interesting.
He gives him
And he
this,
still has it today.
he gives him this power, right? He gives the accuser this power to whatever, what he's got, you can do anything you want with it. So then we have this terrible story, right? We shift to this story about Job's sons and daughters. Verse 13, we're feasting at the oldest brother's house. A messenger arrived at Job's home with this news. Your oxen were plowing with the donkeys feeding beside them when the Sabaeans raided us. A nomadic tribe. They stole all the animals and killed all the farmhands. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news. The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, a third messenger arrived with this news. 3 bands of Chaldean raiders have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news. Your sons and daughters were feasting in their older brother's home. Suddenly, a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness and hit the house on all sides. The house collapsed, and all your children are dead. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. So it's just boom, 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 right? It's just this, gut punch, gut punch, gut punch, gut punch, one after the other, starting with his wealth, all the way down to his children.
And it never seems to occur to Job that the whole thing is absurdly contrived.
It does not.
It happens that closely. You think that would occur to just about anybody. This can't be random.
So, this is really important. Job stood up and tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell to the ground in worship. I think that's a really important verse in the book of Job. Because when we start getting this stuff about, Job does not start by saying, this is unfair what God has done to me. In fact, he says just the opposite. He says, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I'll be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. So from the beginning, Job is not inclined to say that God has been unfair to him. Now, as we go, he kind of gets to that, but he mainly gets to that in response to his friends, because his friends are going to be saying what in effect?
Things did something wrong somewhere along
The
those.
friends are going to be saying, clearly God is mad at you. Clearly you did something wrong. There's a reason they say that. We'll talk about that. But clearly they think it's cut and dry. They're all in on that idea.
Legalistic thinking.
Job is not, at least at the beginning, that's not occurred to Job. Job says, what?
Say this was God's to give me, so it's his to take away.
God can do what he wants.
Maybe in that sense, he knows that it's not random.
Yeah.
He attributes it to God immediately.
He does, which he would. I mean, we live in a time where, we kind of, recognize that, but in Job's day, people were much more inclined to see the hand of God in whatever happened to them. And Job is going to see the hand of God in this. This is something that God did or allowed to happen. What's the difference? And he says, and he can do that.
Shows a lot of depth.
He's allowed to do that. and so, if I leave as naked as the day I came, that's all right. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now, is he grieving? Yeah, he's absolutely grieving, right? It's not that he's a robot. He doesn't have any feelings about this, but he is acknowledging the sovereignty of God, which is interesting that the book begins that way, because it's going to end that way too. Where were you when I made the, Do you know where I keep the snow when it's not snowing? Do you know, what do you know about creation? What do you know about the world? Um, and so that's how it begins. That's how it's going to wind up resolving. And all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. He knows God is involved somehow, right? It's not that he's not saying God has nothing to do with this. What he's saying is, I can't find fault with God for doing this, which is quite a statement.
You had to be very stoic to do that. Everybody's going to be filled with emotion, you fill my family.
And he's grieving. He's shaved his head. He's going through all the signs, the cultural signs of grieving. He's doing the grieving, but he's not going to blame. He's not going to charge God with wrongdoing. Is what it comes down to. And by the way, he sticks with that, more or less. There's some times where he says, I'd sure like to talk to God because I think I'd sure like to get him into court because I think I'd win the case, which is also an interesting thing. But he's not going to charge God with wrongdoing.
The way it's worded is interesting, that he doesn't charge God foolishly. In a sense, he charges God with doing it, but maybe there's some.
That's a translation. Foolishly, does it say that somewhere in one of your translations? It's a translation question. I can't remember the specifics now. It's more like he does not charge God with chicanery, with wrongdoing. Yeah.
He seems to have the depth to know that there's a time just to sit before God and let God be God, and there's nothing else he can do about it. Yeah, at the time. But
And
I think that he's just a good example that way for us.
What you're going to see him doing pretty soon is just sitting before God because
Well,
he can't do anything else.
quietly.
Yeah.
He didn't scream, he didn't yell, swear, or anything else. He just sat before God, and it's a good example for us if we ever go through a tragedy like that. Now he's gonna get out of that mode and move on, but.
Now I think it's interesting too. His response to grief is worship. I think there's some power in that, right? The response to grief. Sometimes the human response to terrible grief is sort of to pull away from worship. I think Job kind of gives us the example of grief being a time to kind of go all in on worship. Think of my friend who visits his daughter's grave on Easter morning every year. That's a response to this grief, this sorrow. It's worship, it's hope, it's resurrection, it's the promise of God, and that's what I think we've got with Job here, who's going to try to find some footing in worshiping God, remembering that God is. I don't get to judge God. I don't get to send judgment on him, right? I trust him even in the difficult times. What is it? Habakkuk says, even if this is not it, but it's even if the fridge is empty and the cupboard's bare, I'm going to trust God. I'm there. So we go on then to chapter 2, which is still part of this same story. Again, the members of the heavenly court came again to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser came with them. Where have you come from? The Lord asked. Been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. God ramps it up, right? Then the Lord asked the accuser, have you noticed my servant Job? He's the finest man. It's the exact same thing he said before, except he has maintained his integrity, even though you urged me to harm him without cause. God, right from the beginning, acknowledges Job doesn't deserve any of this, right? This is not happening because Job needs correcting. This is not at all. The accuser replied to the Lord, skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his life, but reach out and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to your face. All right, do with him as you please, the Lord said to the accuser. This is where I would sure like God to say, no, we're not going to do that. You've done enough. Just acknowledge.
Talks about everything.
But here's why this is important. What we have to see as we begin this is Job going to be righteous only when he gets something from it? Or is he? And that's what this book is about. It's about this idea that to truly be righteous, you've got to be able to hang in there when you're getting nothing in response. In fact, when it's hard, when there's sorrow, when there's grief. And that's what the accuser does well. He points out the places where, Job's righteousness, it might not hold together if you take away some of these benefits. So does that make sense? That's what's really important about this book to see. And that's why the accuser's role is important. By the way, after chapter 2, we do not see him anymore. He's kind of a minor character in that way. But he's really important because he highlights this theological question. Are you going to be righteous when you're getting nothing for it?
Talking about pure faith.
Yeah.
It's going on faith alone.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
How many people do that?
The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, right? Can you say that and mean it? And so that's kind of the question of this book. And the friends are going to kind of get it backwards, because the friends are going to see what's happened, and instead of seeing Job remaining blameless and righteous in all this, they're going to say to him, obviously you've done something wrong, and God is getting you for it.
He's a sinner.
Right. And they're getting exactly the wrong lesson from the whole experience, which is why later God's going to say, Job spoke rightly, you did not. Do as you please, he says, but spare his life. Maybe at this point, that's a dubious blessing, right? Spare his life. I mean, if you ask Job, he might, I think he would definitely say, no, don't bother to do that.
He does say that.
Yeah.
His first speech is.
Yeah.
Better if I had been.
I wish I hadn't been born. That's exactly right. That's how he begins. Again, he does not begin, why did God do this? He begins with, if this is what life is, what's the point? All right. So Satan left the Lord's presence. The accuser left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. This is the line I mentioned earlier that seems to echo Deuteronomy 28, I think it is, where there's a list of punishment if you break the covenant. And one of them is boils from the sole of your foot to the top of your head. The Hebrew is exact, apparently. So there are some people who say, well, that sounds like it's Job is receiving the covenant punishment, the punishment for breaking the covenant, and he doesn't deserve it. Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, "Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die." But Job, this is the big question in the book, right? Why are you still sitting there? Just curse God and die. I mean, my goodness, what's it going to take, right? I mean, we sort of read that and go, thanks, honey, for being so supportive. But I mean, she's just vocalizing the question that's hanging around there,
And she's lost everything.
And she's lost everything too.
She's seen her husband.
That's right. That's right. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not like she has it easy, So I mean, fair enough. But Job replied, "You talk like a foolish woman." Foolish in the sense of you're not acknowledging God. There's no fear of God in what you said. You're talking like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? So in all this, Job said nothing wrong. So Job has done nothing wrong. And when in response to all these catastrophes that have come upon his life, he says nothing. And that's really important as we kind of get into the meat of this book. All right, comments or anything at that point?
It's a question.
Him a little bit, I mean. He had a thankful attitude through it all. And it's hard to believe she doesn't. There's a difference, significant difference. He has an honorable statement, she doesn't.
Yeah.
But this just shows the difference in their character.
I don't know how thankful he is. He's at least
It's like it is.
he's at least faithful, right? He's at least he's at least
Faithfulness,
yeah.
Thankfulness. And
He's at least, God has given us good things. Are we now to blame him
That's thankful.
for receiving bad
He's on the
things?
positive side, not the negative. She's looking on more the negative side, not the positive. It's an interesting contrast.
Mhm.
but,
Forgot this, but the mention of the foreign raiders probably helps state the book fairly well too.
At least the action, the setting.
The Chaldeans are a little, but the Chaldeans, if they existed, it can't be super early and
And it's probably not the Chaldeans of the exile. It's probably not the Neo-Babylonians. It's the older Babylonians.
that's what I thought. So by the 2nd century BC or whatever, they were gone. It has to be earlier than that.
Somebody else was going to make a comment, I think.
Yeah, I was saying that after chapter 2, chapter 2, the accuser vanished, as you said, but he's still working through the friends of Job, and at the same time the wife.
Mhm.
But why do we think that if Job cursed God, Job will die in the first place? Why do the wife think if you curse God of what you are passing through, you will die? Why?
Is she just saying give up already? Is she just saying, just go, why are you holding on to your integrity, your rights? Just curse God and then just give up. Just die already. It's just, you're miserable. This is no life. I think maybe she's just telling him, give up. Just give up on all this. I think. I don't know, but I think that's kind of what I get out of it, that she's just telling him, oh, just give it up already. Just let it go.
Yeah, that's the reason why I say the accuser vanished, but still working through the best people of Job so that they can persuade him to, offend God. So in the book of Job itself, if you read the book and then you understanding it well, you can see that it gives you some situation which sometimes you will see the difference between existence of human and then existence of God.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, we're going to get a long. Job is a wisdom book. Job is a book of wisdom. It's part of the wisdom tradition that gave us Proverbs, that gave us Ecclesiastes, that gave us Song of Songs. It's part of that same wisdom tradition, but it's a little different from them. But it's really interesting as you get to chapter, I think it's 28 in Job. There's a poem, and it just sort of comes right in the middle of the action of the book, and the poem is about wisdom. It's about the importance of trying to find wisdom. Whatever you do, try to find wisdom. It talks about how human beings can dig gold and silver and all these valuable things out of the ground, but we have a hard time finding wisdom. But God is the one that can give us wisdom. And so that comes at the end of all these three friends just banging around trying to find something remotely wise to say and having no luck at all. And before Bildad, the young buck who says, well, you old guys don't have it, but I understand. I know some things you don't know. And I went to college. I know some things. and so I've got, so it's right in the middle of all these human attempts to give us some kind of wisdom. And all of it is empty. All of it's useless.
You're right, wisdom's in there, you gotta dig it out.
Yep. And it comes from God. So, well, next week, we won't get into the friends this week, but next week, we will get into the friends, when they hear about all this and they come, I guess we'll get into it a little bit. Verse 11, they come to comfort and console it. And they are on the right track at first because they come and just sit with him for like a week. They just come and sit with him for a week in all of his sorrow and all of his grief. They just come and they sit beside him. They're just there with him. It's when they start talking that, as is true for many of us, myself included, it's when you start talking that you get yourself in trouble. Yeah. So that, so they, their quietness helps a lot. They saw that his suffering was too great for words, verse 13 says. All right, so we will pick up in chapter 3 next week with we'll look at what we're gonna do, I think, is we're gonna look at the three friends, all of their first speeches. And then maybe we'll look at some of the other ones and try to see where they're different, but they're not very different, honestly. There's a whole lot of repetition. So we'll look at the first three speeches probably in a little bit of detail. Again, not verse for verse. And then we'll look at Job's responses. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why those things are suave. They could be distilled down to one chapter, probably all.
It's long. It's long. And it's kind of interesting. I think it's Zophar is the last one who doesn't get a third speech. And it's almost like it just sort of peters out. It's just sort of like they just sort of, they look at Zophar and he's like, I don't know. and that's that, So you sort of see again the sort of limitations of human words and wisdom, right? That we don't know as much as we think we do.